All right. In this video, we're going to go over the basics of AutoCAD, take you from absolutely nothing to being able to draw a couple things, some lines and rectangles. And we're going to do that by creating a template. We're going to create the border of what will be a lot of our drawings, right? So the same border that if you're in my class that we draw when we do hand drafting, right? Very simple border with some reference lines and a very, very simple title block. So when you load up AutoCAD for the first time, you should see a screen that looks a lot like this. It might look a little different depending on your version of AutoCAD, but for the most part, it's going to look like this. And what we're going to do is load up a new drawing by clicking new right over on this side of the screen. All right. So that's going to load up the default AutoCAD template, just called AutoCAD.dwt. We'll create our own template. We'll save what we're going to work on today as our own template later, and I'll show you how to do that. But for now, here is AutoCAD, right? We're in the Model tab of AutoCAD. We'll go over that, what that means in another moment. But we have our canvas here, which is just this black screen with all the white or gray grid lines. You see that we've got some X and Y lines here. These are our axes, right? Or our axes, just like in geometry. We've got our X axis, and in green here, we've got our Y axis, which means all of the points in this direction are going to be positive, right? Both X and Y will be positive. We can draw on the negative down here if we wanted to, but we're generally not going to do that. We're going to keep most of our drawings here in positive space. Notice how I'm moving the camera around. So I'm going to go ahead and just very quickly draw two circles. Don't worry about how I'm doing this right now. Just watch as I move around my screen. So what I'm doing here is I'm holding the middle mouse button down. That's the scroll wheel. If you didn't know, you can press the scroll wheel on most mouses that have a scroll wheel. You can press that down and hold it, and that's its own button. If I press and hold the mouse wheel down and move my mouse, I pan the camera, P-A-N. And that's that little hand that's coming up. And that basically just means that I can move my drawing up, down, left, right. Of course, this helps me navigate bigger drawings, right? So I can move around the screen. Very useful. If I use the scroll wheel by scrolling up and down, notice how I'm zooming. And where I move my mouse depends on where I zoom. So if I move my mouse to this left circle and zoom in, I zoom in on the left circle. And if I put my mouse into the right circle and zoom in, I zoom in on the right circle. Pretty simple, but very useful. All right, I'm going to delete everything. And now you can follow along with the video, pause as you need, and follow my directions now. So I'll mention the tools as I use them so that you can follow along. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do is just draw a rectangle to make up our frame. So if you remember in class, right, we had our 8.5 by 11 standard sheet of US letter paper. That's 8.5 inches by 11 inches. And we drew that, right, in landscape mode, right? Not portrait, but landscape, meaning that the rectangle on our paper was more like this, right? And not like this. Just that it was longer going right and left than it was going up and down. But the border that we drew on that paper was not 8.5 by 11, right? We went 3/4 of an inch in on each side. We went 3/4 of an inch on each side. So we're going to do that on our paper here by starting our rectangle 3/4 of an inch in on X and up on Y. So how are we going to do that? Well, first you need to know how to draw a rectangle. And we're going to do that by typing REC. So notice how by my cursor, as I typed, right? As I type, you see I'm typing into this little bar by my cursor. So it's almost like a search function. So if I type REC, you should see right under the cursor in this little search window at the very top is the rectang tool, which is, of course, the rectangle tool. So whatever is there at the very top, when you press enter, that's the tool you're going to go into. So since rectang or the rectangle tool is at the very top, when I press enter, I'm now in the rectangle tool. So let me do that again. REC, enter, and I'm in the rectangle tool. So AutoCAD asks me, and it's always useful to look by your mouse here at what AutoCAD is asking. So it's asking me to specify the first corner. So AutoCAD draws rectangles by placing two corners. So my first corner is going to be 3/4 of an inch on the x-axis and 3/4 of an inch on the y-axis. So 3/4 of an inch, if we're typing for decimal, is going to be 0.75. And because we're using x and y coordinates here, we're going to separate the two by pressing the comma key and then doing 0.75 and then pressing enter. And notice how that placed the first corner. And where my mouse goes, I can define where the second corner is. So I'm going to go ahead and do that again. That was REC, enter, 0.75, comma, 0.75, enter. So now I'm not going to do a coordinate for the other corner. I could tell AutoCAD where the other corner goes based on coordinates, but instead I'm just going to use the length, the width, and the height to define where my rectangle goes. Or I'm sorry, how big my rectangle is. Now it's important to know that where your mouse is when you do these dimensions matter. Because it's going to stay, the rectangle is going to stay where the mouse is and be the dimensions that you put. So if my mouse is here, the rectangle will end up like this. And if my mouse is here, it'll end up that way, or there, it'll end up that way. But I want to be inside of the red and green lines. So I'm going to place my mouse over here, okay, up and to the right of where that first corner is. Now, we were 3/4 of an inch in on the borders of our paper. So if we're going to do the width of our rectangle, we have to take the width of the sheet of paper and take 3/4 of an inch in on both sides. So 3/4 plus 3/4 is 3/8, and 3/8, when expressed as a decimal, is 0.375. Okay? 0.375. I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. 0.375 is half of 3/4. That is not what I meant to say. 3/4 plus 3/4 is 1.5. Okay. You're going to hear 0.375 a little later in this video. That's why my mind got mixed up. What I mean to say is 3/4 plus 3/4, which is 1.5. So if the width of a sheet of paper is 11 inches, 11 minus 1.5, okay, is 9.5. So the width of our rectangle is going to be 9.5. And you'll notice that as I type that, that number goes in the top box. And that top box is saying how wide is my rectangle. You can see by this dotted line, that's what that's saying. Okay. Now to switch boxes, right? Because my cursor, you could see it blinking there in that top box. To switch to the next box, which is the height, I'm going to press the tab key. If you don't know where your tab key is, just look for Q on your keyboard, and it's to the left of Q. So now to determine what my height of my rectangle is, I'm going to do the same thing that I did before. Take 1.5 from that 8.5 that a standard sheet of paper is. So 8.5 minus 1.5 is going to be 7. Now I don't want to switch back to the other box, so I'm not going to press tab here. Instead, what I'm going to do, because I'm done, I'm just going to press enter. Now that I press enter, I have my rectangle. Okay. If your rectangle looks a little bigger or smaller than mine, don't worry. As long as you typed in the right numbers, your rectangle is correct. Just make sure that you've zoomed in correctly. Okay. So remember that you can use the mouse wheel to zoom in. All right. If you ever lose your drawing completely, like maybe you just typed that number in and it looks like your rectangle completely disappeared, right? Maybe something like this. Don't worry, your rectangle is still there. If you look on the right side of AutoCAD, there's a little button here with a magnifying glass with an X on it. That stands for Zoom Extents, okay? Which just means that the screen is going to zoom so that it fits everything you've drawn right onto the screen, just like that. Now, for me, this zooms a little too far in, so I'm going to zoom out a click, and there's my rectangle. 9.5 by 7. Perfect. So now what I'm going to do is I am going to go ahead and do the lines, the little reference lines that we had on our box before. So we had 3 on each side, little something like this, and they were on all of the sides. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put 4 lines coming out of the middle of each side. And to do that, I'm going to want to make sure that I get the middle exactly. And to get the middle exactly, I'm going to use what are called object snap points. Okay? Object snap points. The object snap points are turned on and off by this button right here, where you have this big square with this little square next to it. Now, this button should be on by default on your AutoCAD. If it's not, you can turn that on now. But what we want to turn on, which is usually not on by default, which we can access this menu here by clicking the little arrow next to it. The little white arrow. If we open up that menu, we're going to find midpoint right here. This is usually not on by default. Okay? I just reinstalled AutoCAD on my computer, so it's not even on mine. I'm going to go ahead and turn this on by clicking on it, and you'll see it'll get a little white check. With the white check on, I can now go ahead and draw and snap to the midpoint of these 4 lines, the top, the right, left, top, and bottom. So these are going to be lines. They're not going to be rectangles. So I'm going to use the line tool. That one's real simple. L. And notice that line is right at the top there. So I don't even have to type anything else, just L. Now I can press the enter key to enter into the line command. AutoCAD wants me to specify where the first point is. Well, the first point is going to be touching one of the midpoints of my rectangle. So I'm going to go ahead and find the midpoint by locating this little green triangle. That's the midpoint of the rectangle. Go up to that triangle until my mouse, you notice how when you get real close to it, your mouse kind of snaps right on it. I'm going to click on the triangle, and now you notice that the line, one end of that line has snapped to where I clicked. And now I can place the other end of the line wherever I want. Well, I want that other end of the line to be horizontal. And I want it to be half of the distance from where the border was to the edge of the paper. And that's where we're going to get half of 3/4, which I had said before was 3/8. And that in decimal form is 0.375. Now, notice that when I pull this line to be horizontal, it snaps on a green line. And that's very useful. Same thing if I go vertical as well. That's very useful because I want to make sure that this line is perfectly horizontal, perfectly right at 0 degrees or 180, depending on what your perspective is, right? But 0 degrees in this case. So I'm going to pull my mouse so that I'm right on that green line. And then I'm going to type 0.375. Enter. Now I'm still in the line tool, but I don't want to draw any more lines. So I'm just going to press escape to exit the line tool. I'm going to go ahead and repeat that all around the rectangle. Now I could press L, enter to get back into the line tool, but instead what I'm going to do each time to save a little bit of time is I'm going to just press the enter key. If you're not in a tool and you press the enter key, what that does is it brings up the last tool that you used so that you can repeatedly use the same tool over and over again if you have to use it over and over again, like we have to here. So I'm just going to press the enter key. I'm going to go up to the very top and find that triangle again. Give it a click. Pull my mouse straight up this time. 0.375. Enter. So I said before that you can exit the line tool by pressing the escape key. You can also exit the line tool by pressing the enter key. And since we have to press enter again to get back into the line tool when we're done, we move our fingers less around the keyboard, saving us a lot of time. So instead of pressing escape this time, I'm going to press enter, and then I'm going to press enter again to get back in the line tool. Find the next midpoint, this time on the left, click, pull my mouse horizontally, 0.375, enter, enter, enter. Click, down, 0.375, enter, enter. All right, we now have the 4 lines on the midpoints of each side of our rectangle. Now the next lines were away from these center lines 1 inch on either side. So the ones on the right and left, they were 1 inch below and 1 inch above. And the ones on the top and bottom were 1 inch to the left and 1 inch to the right. So I'm going to go ahead and do that as well now. So I'm going to press enter again to get back in the line tool. I'm going to find the end of this line and hover over it. And now if I pull my mouse down, I haven't clicked here, right? Make sure you don't click when you do this, because remember, I don't want to draw from this line. I don't want a line here, but I do want a line down. And if I pull down along the green dotted line, AutoCAD will start my next line along this line. And the number that I type will be how far down it goes. So I want 1 inch down. So I'm going to type 1, enter. And now notice that the start of this line is exactly on the same line as where I dragged from. So now all I have to do, I'll zoom in a little bit, pull to the left, following the green line here, keeping myself nice and horizontal. And when I get back to the border, AutoCAD will snap right to it. And when it snaps, I'm going to click. And there you go. Remember to get out of this tool, the line tool, so I can draw my next line. I can just press enter and then enter again to go back. So that was the line below. Let me do the line above. I'm going to do the same thing. Hover over the endpoint, this time pulling up, typing 1, enter to jump 1 inch above that point, zooming in to follow this horizontal line, back to the border, click when I snap to it. Enter to get out of the line tool, enter to get back in the line tool. All right, I'm going to stop talking for a moment while I do all the other lines here. I've got 2, 4, 6 to go. So just watch as I do this. And there you have it. If you have to rewatch any of that, feel free to pause the video and scroll back a little bit. This can be a little, drawing with AutoCAD can be a little tricky. You press one wrong thing on the keyboard, you're gonna get all turned around. One thing I recommend, if you are a little stuck, like let's say, right, I'm in the line tool and I start drawing some weird stuff and I don't exactly know what happened and I don't know how to get out of it. One good thing you can do, press escape 3 times, 1, 2, 3. That'll make sure you're out of all of your tools. And then you can hold the control key and type Z on your keyboard, and that will undo some of your mistakes. And you can just undo until you're back to a position where things look right. I've seen people, they select something and they click and they mess all kinds of stuff up. Right? Don't worry. You can always get yourself out of a situation. Just press escape 3 times, hold control, and press Z. And I'm going to do that until everything looks normal again. And then we can continue from there. Okay. I'm going to do 2 more lines now because what I want is a title block. Now, title blocks can get very, very complicated in engineering drawings, but the one that we're going to do is very simple. We're just going to have a single little rectangle here for our name. Just like we did in class, we're going to just have a single little title block here for our name, the part number, and then the scale. Okay. Very simple. So to go ahead and get that block, I'm going to zoom in to the bottom middle of our rectangle. I'm going to press L enter to go into the line tool. I'm going to find this midpoint here and pull my mouse upwards. So I'm drawing on this vertical line right here. And I want this to be 1/2 inch from the border. So 0.5, enter. I'm going to pull all the way across to go onto the border here. And then I'm going to go down from that corner as well. I also could have, I'm going to back up a little bit. I also could have started my line on this midpoint, pulled up, .5, and then pulled to the right until I snap onto the border and click and press enter as well. That works too. Now, we're pretty much done here. This is pretty much everything we want, but instead of saving this and then manually creating a text box in here every time, we're going to save ourselves a little bit of trouble and turn this into something a little bit fancy. What we're going to do is we're going to turn this into a block. A block is something that we use in AutoCAD, almost like if you're familiar with Photoshop or other drawing or painting programs. Like it's a bit like a brush in those programs, meaning something that we've saved and we can use over and over again, almost like a stamp, right? Almost like a stamp. So to do that, we're going to enter the block command. That's going to be BLOCK, right? Or I believe all you got to do is type B. So go ahead and type B, enter, to enter the block command. The block command is going to make this window come up where we're going to define what our block is. The first thing it asks for here is a name. So we're going to call this JPT letter template. JPT letter template. We're going to leave the base point at origin 0, 0, 0. That way, when we go to put it down later, we can just put it down at 0, 0, and it's perfect. So don't worry about the base point for now. The objects, we're going to go ahead and press this little button right here to select the objects for the screen. And I'm going to select every object. So I'm just going to put my mouse at the top right of what I drew and click once and let go. And that allows me to window select. I'm just going to pull a window over everything and then click and let go. All right. Now all of the lines I made should be blue. So I just have to press enter to say that I'm done. Now, if you drew everything just like I did, you should have 15 objects selected. Under behavior, we're just going to leave everything exactly how it is. So don't worry about anything in behavior. This is going to be set in inches, so we're good. We don't have to worry about that. The only other thing that we're going to change is this little button right here, open in block editor. We're going to make sure that that is checked because we want to add the part where we could type our name into it. So I'm going to check that box and press OK. Now the whole screen is going to go gray to just show us that we're not editing models anymore. We're not in model. We're not in our model editor. We're in our block editor. Now the block editor has a ton of other tools and functions that we could do and change and all of that. Don't worry about any of these except for attribute definition, which is right up here. Okay. So like a little shopping tag right there. We're just going to click that little shopping tag button for attribute definition. And we're going to define some things. Again, there's a lot of extra little buttons and things to type and options to modify, but just only worry about these 3 boxes that I have here on my screen. And I'll show you exactly what to type in. So tag, we're going to call this title because that's where that's what this is. It's the title block. So we're going to call that title. Prompt is what the computer is going to say when it asks us to type something in here. So what we're going to have it say is we're going to say type the title here. Very simple. And then default is what's going to be in that title if we don't change it, right? So what it's going to say as soon as it pops up. So what we're going to put in there is name dash part number dash scale. To sort of tell the user that that's the 3 things that we want in this title block. We want them to put their name, the part number, and the scale. So make sure that all 3 of your boxes look exactly like this. So don't put your name in here. That's not what I mean to say. I want you to literally type N-A-M-E, name. So we're going to type everything exactly as I put it in here. Do not put your name there. Type the word name. Once yours looks exactly like mine, you can pause the video if you need to take some time to type all that out. But I'm going to continue and press OK. Now I'm going to place in here where the title should go. I don't have exact dimensions for this. I could get real picky and say that it needs to be, you know, so and so and all this so that everything is perfectly centered. But I'm just going to go with pretty good for right now. And just try to get this thing as centered as possible. One thing I am looking for is it looks like this blue line is pretty well centered in the box here. So I'm just going to try to make sure that the blue line and the middle of the E are aligned. So I need to bring this a little lower right now so that E, this middle part of the E is touching that blue line. You know, that's a pretty good frame of reference, I think. So let's move this slightly lower. That looks pretty good. Click. How did I do? Not too bad. Maybe a little too high, but good enough for me. Once the title is inside of where it needs to be, you can go ahead and click this big green check mark here that says Close Block Editor. And make sure it asks you to, when it asks you to save, that you click the top one that says save. All right, now that we saved that as a block, we can actually delete what we made. Because remember that this is a template, right? This is going to be what's going to load every time that we load our template, because we're not going to be using AutoCAD.dwt. We're going to save this so that we can load up that template. And we don't want that border there. We want to draw whatever we want on the model tab. Where we want the border to be, where we want that title block that we just made, is we want it on one of the layout tabs. Okay. So I'm going to switch to layout 1. If you don't know how I did that, all I did was click on the little tab down here called layout 1. I'm going to switch to layout 1, and I'm going to delete everything on layout 1 by holding Control and pressing A to select all. That's Control A to select all. And I'm going to press the delete key on my keyboard, not backspace, but the delete key. Find the word that says D-E-L-E-T-E, delete. I'm going to click that key on my keyboard and delete it and press delete. That deleted everything. I'm going to switch to the output tab on the ribbon. It's right up there. And then I'm going to press Page Setup Manager right there. When the Page Setup Manager window pops up, I can edit layout 1 or layout 2. So I'm going to edit layout 1 and click modify. And here we can set our printing options. Now, because my students cannot print onto the printer, usually they send me everything electronically, we're going to go ahead and choose Microsoft Print to PDF, because we want an electronic format. We're not going to send anything to the printer. After we select Microsoft Print to PDF, we're going to make sure that the letter size, the paper size, is set to letter, because we spent all that time making sure that our measurements fit on a sheet of paper. We're going to leave plot area default, plot offset default, plot scale default. Don't touch any of that. Don't touch anything up here. We are done. Just make sure that this is indeed in landscape, because we want to make sure that we're printing in landscape. Most drawings are landscape when we're doing engineering. So all of that set, we're going to click OK. We're done here, so we can click close. We don't need the layout 2 tab, so we're going to right click layout 2 and click delete. It's going to ask you, are you sure? We're going to say, okay, that's fine. And layout 1, instead of calling it layout 1, we're just going to right click on that. And we're going to click rename. And instead of layout 1, we're going to call it letter. That way, if somebody else were to use this, they would know that it's going to print letter sized. Most engineering drawings are not letter sized. They're usually printed on very large sheets of paper, so that you can see in very good detail, very, very large. But, you know, we're a school. We print on regular standard printer paper most of the time. So we want it letter sized. So now we can put that block that we made onto this sheet of paper. So we're going to switch to the Insert tab here, which is right there and right next to Home. And after we press on the Insert tab on the ribbon, we're going to go to the very first button here that says Insert. And this will show you all of the blocks you created in your drawing. We only have one block so far. That's the actual thing that we just made, the little template we just made. So we're going to take that block and click on it. And now I can place it wherever I want. Of course, I don't want it wherever I want. I want it perfectly centered on this paper. But since the base point we said was the origin, we can place this at the origin and it'll be perfectly centered on our piece of paper. So the origin is just 0, 0, enter. The first thing that pops up here is it's asking us, remember that prompt, type the title here, which was name, part, and scale. But we're just setting the template. We're not drawing a part right now. So we're just going to leave this exactly how it is and just press OK. And there is our template on our piece of paper, looking real nice. So now I can go ahead and save this as a template. So if I go back to the model tab, the first thing I'm going to want to do, because the templates also save how far zoomed in you are. So what I'm going to do, just to make sure things are good, I'm going to create a circle with a 1-inch diameter. Or I'm sorry, a 1-inch radius. And then I'm going to zoom extents to that. And then zoom out so that, you know, it looks pretty decent. So that's 1 inch. Most of our drawings are going to be about this size, around, you know, 1, 2, 3 inch things. So once I have that sort of level of zoom, I can delete that circle. And I know that the zoom level for when we first open our drawing is set to a reasonable amount, right? Because we're not drawing big buildings here. We're not drawing things in hundreds of feet or miles. We're dealing with drawings in this class for things that are pretty small. So this is a good zoom level to stay at. Now all we have to do is go to the AutoCAD symbol up here, save as, and we're going to save this. Instead of a DWG, right here where it says file type, we're going to go down to DWT and save this as a drawing template. I'm going to save that as a drawing template. With that saved as a drawing template, we can call that JPT letter template, just like we did when we saved the block. Same name, JPT letter template. And it's automatically going to go into our template files in our AutoCAD folder. And you can go ahead and click that save button and end that right there. All right, thanks for watching the video. I hope it was helpful. I'll see you in the next one.